Thank you for joining us on Aiken This Week. I'm Glenn Parker. Joining us today is Chairman of the Planning Commission, Liz Stewart, and making a return visit is Tommy Paradise, Director of Planning Department. Tommy, you're the first returner we've had, I think, so I guess we liked what you did first show.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, sir.
Liz, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're not just a Planning Commission member. You have a whole life in and of itself. So
We do. Well, all of us on the Planning Commission are volunteers. This is a volunteer position. We are, each member of the Planning Commission is appointed by a city council member, and all of us have other lives. This is just a volunteer effort. I myself own my own business, and so I have a vested interest in making sure that we engage the business community and that everything that we consider looks at all sides of it. Exactly.
And how long have you been on the Planning Commission?
This is my 7th year.
7th year. And you're appointed by which councilman?
Right now, Philip Mary.
Philip Mary. Okay. Okay. Now, who are the members of the Planning Commission? And I think there's a vice chair also. Who's the vice chair?
The vice chair is Jack Hunter.
Okay.
He is a semi-retired attorney, and so he helps us stay on the straight and narrow with some of the issues. And he's very passionate about a lot of the issues that come before us. We also have Susan DeBrule, who is an educator. She was an English teacher, so she makes sure we write everything correctly. And then we have Kent Cubbage. He works at Aiken Technical College. He's an instructor there. And we have Charles Maxwell, who has a sideline business in the landscaping, so he brings some expertise to the table. We have Bob Begley, who is with the Aiken Regional Medical Centers, so he brings a certain level of expertise to the table as well. In fact, his was particularly useful when we were looking at lights, and we learned a lot more about lumens and things than we ever wanted to know, and Bob was very helpful in describing that. And did I get everybody? Let's see who else.
Mr. McMichaels.
Oh, yes, John McMichael. Yes, he is with Hudson Etheridge Insurance. And so we have a very diverse group. Some folks are retired, some are working, some are semi-retired. But they're all very experienced people. They're all well entrenched in the community. They have a lot of contacts, so it makes it easier for people to reach out to us with any concerns they might have.
Okay. Now, I've always looked at the Planning Commission as being one of the most difficult in the city because you guys have to make some hard decisions up there. But now recently the city decided that we wanted to start airing these on Channel 4. I think you air them live. And for some reason, and maybe it was just yesterday, but all of a sudden you have a 4.5, 5-minute meeting. How's that work? Is that good planning on the part of the chairman?
It's excellent planning. Well, you know, we do follow Robert's rules, and if you're done, you're done. Yesterday it was one of our record short ones. Now, we have had meetings that have gone on till 9:30, 10:30,
Sure.
11 o'clock at night, much like the city council meetings. It really just depends on the agenda. In this particular case, we had 2 items and one was withdrawn just before the meeting, and so we only had 1 item to deal with, and apparently it was not a contentious issue because no one spoke either for or against it, so it made it very, very easy.
I watched it quickly this morning. It almost looked like you were encouraging someone to come up and speak.
I was trying to get some audience participation, and it didn't work. They just looked at each other and then no one jumped up. So.
Sure.
So I put it back to the commission for a vote. We voted and we were done.
Good.
So,
share with us what the role of the Planning Commission is.
Well, it's really a very comprehensive role. We are a recommending body to City Council. We do not make specific decisions ourselves. When we take a vote, a lot of times people think, well, they're done, but it's not. All we have voted to do is to make this recommendation to City Council, and most items require 2 readings at City Council, so they are the final. In fact, I will often remind folks, this is the date it's going to come before City Council, and we encourage you to participate there. So they don't leave here thinking, okay, it's a done deal. But basically, in a global perspective, we're trying to make sure that we maintain the highest quality of life for our citizens. And we do that by looking at how livable is this community, how well can we all have a great quality of life and balance that with an economic vitality. And so we really do look at all issues, not just very specifically to the application before us, but more globally to what's the impact of this and what will happen later. I think it helps that there are two attorneys on the commission, because we are trained to look at things that way, is what's the consequence of this decision or this action. And so we've encouraged, in the commission, I think we've got a great team, and we do look at things and the interesting thing is that we have a lot of different perspectives. Our work sessions are very exciting at times because you'll see very, very diverse perspectives. And we just talk it through until we can come to some consensus or make some additional requests of staff for research.
Okay, and you mentioned those work sessions just quickly. Those two, I believe, are open to the public in most cases.
They're open to the public. However, they can't participate in the meeting. But we do very frequently have folks in attendance that we will want to ask some questions of, and we do that in an informal way. But we all know that we don't make the decisions on our positions within the work sessions. They are discussions, they are information sharing and gathering, and the value for me is to draw everyone into that discussion and to see what are the things that we really need to consider that we may not have thought of. But then when we come into our open meetings and we have the citizen participation, that's when we make our decision after we have heard everyone.
Okay. And you mentioned that everything somewhat comes through an application. What are those applications? How do y'all process those?
Okay, well, that's a great question because it varies. Now, the applications come from a variety of sources. Sometimes the citizen, for example, will want to submit an application for annexation or some variance. Sometimes a developer, we've had a lot less of those lately, but sometimes a developer will bring a plat for a new development. Sometimes City Council directs us to look at an ordinance. The city manager will from time to time, in fact just recently, asked us to look at an ordinance and consider whether it needed revision. And then of course sometimes, like with our 10-year comprehensive plan, that's a state law that's mandated that we have to look at things. So they come from a variety of different sources. But when it comes before us, we look at and we depend a lot on our planning department. They do a fabulous job of giving us the research and the background and the history, and if they recommend some additional conditions be added to the application's approval. We will look at all of that, and then we also look at, for example, if we're looking at a development or a new construction item, we'll look at not just that site plan, but we'll look at how does this fit into the neighborhood? How does it fit in? What impacts will it have on traffic? We can request a traffic study. We make sure there's adequate parking, there's ingress and egress. We look at all of those factors. It's not just what this specific building site will look like.
And I think you look at it differently but fairly, depending on where it is. Is it in the
Yes.
old Aiken district?
Yes.
Is it not? And you have to take all of that into consideration.
We do, if it's in the historic district, the horse district, but then the nice thing is that there are specific groups. We do have a historic committee, we do have an equine committee, and we invite those people to share their perspectives as well. We can't know everything, but we can listen to everybody.
True. Now, you hit it briefly, but where do most of these applications come from?
Well, most of them, I think, are individuals or individual businesses. We'd love to be able to say that a lot of them were, development on a more global scale, but the economy being what it is, because there's a lot of areas, for example, the north side, where we think, that are underdeveloped. But you know, the economy being what it is, that just isn't happening right now. I would say a lot of, you know, this is probably the first time in several months we haven't had an annexation request. That's probably the most common. People want to be annexed to the city primarily for city services like water and sewer.
Okay. Now, when a developer comes to town, I told Tommy the other week when he was going to be on the show, everybody wanted me to ask Tommy, you know, what's coming to town? Tell us what's coming to town. Are we getting a whatever? You know, you just can't do that. How do you review the applications for developers? And you have to have a lot of discretion. You have to have a lot of secrecy in the fact that you just don't want to let out who the businesses are too early in the process.
Well, and you know, the planning department does a really great job of doing all the background and all the research, and lets us know there's going to be a development coming before you, but we don't even know what it is until they get there. And until it goes to the open session, it's usually not known. Although there's often a lot of speculation, as there was with the Starbucks and Panera. I mean, because people are talking to those folks, and they do. You know, it's very hard to keep a secret in a small town.
Sure it is.
But until it officially comes before us, you know, we don't really discuss it.
Okay.
And one of the things too is when it goes to the Planning Commission, we've prepared a staff report. We've received an application, and that is public information. So once that goes out, the Planning Commission are free to disclose it.
Okay. Well, and I was going to ask you, Tommy, and this is probably a good time. You know, we talked a few weeks ago about your role, your staff's role, what all you do on a day-to-day basis. But, you know, every Tuesday following the first city council meeting of the month, I think that's correct.
That's right.
There's a planning commission. It doesn't just happen. What goes into the staff's role of preparing the agenda and everything for the planning commission?
And it really depends what the applications are, but basically we're there to do the homework. Remember, the commissioners have other lives. This is not their job. We get paid to prepare the information for them and do the research. We're there to support them. And so we look and prepare a staff report that looks at the land uses and the land uses in the adjacent areas, how it's may affect the neighbors, the history of the property. And sometimes that's very important to the planning commissioner to have that background. And then how it fits. The other biggie is how does it fit in the comprehensive plan? There's one term that I have learned since working with Liz this past years is the term global. And we look at things globally. And you know, how does it fit into the comprehensive plan? The traffic impact, that's huge, in depending on what part of the city you're at. And then the other thing that we do is we make sure we get that public announcement, public notice out in the newspaper. We post the properties, and then we get comments. And of course, we prefer if you give us written comments. We'll be glad to include that with the staff report for the commission, so that they can. It usually goes out the Friday before the meeting. We deliver it so that they can review it over the weekend. But if we have comments too, then we can see some of the things that's going to come up in the meeting. And we also develop maybe possible recommendations that the commission may want to, how to resolve in some of the issues and comments that we've gotten through that process of public notification, people coming in and reviewing. So on development plans, that's how we kind of handle that. And then text amendment, changes to the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, we work closely with them doing the homework. You know, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And we'll look at see how other communities are handling this. And bring that information into the Planning Commission so we can develop that path forward. And then the work sessions, like Liz says, are great. You bring the information in, they whittle down on it, send it back. We'll refine a little bit, come back the next month. They'll discuss it, refine a little bit more. We'll go back, and then they'll get something that the commission's overall feels like they're comfortable with, and then can move forward with it.
Okay. You used a word, I think, you used the word that staff recommends to the commission. I think back on Ed Evans, and I think that was one of Ed's jewels. He never seemed to take a side. He recommended what the law stated, and here's the options, commission, and that's your role.
Correct. We're there to provide the decision makers the information that they need to make in a knowledgeable decision. If we haven't given them that information, then we failed our mission.
Sure.
Well, I will say, I think Tommy's being a little bit modest because he does follow the Ed Evans model. And we can always trust that the information is carefully researched, it's as accurate as it can be, and it's as unbiased as it can be. And I will say, as I did with Ed, I consider it a real blessing to have had Ed as the planning director and now Tommy, because we've developed the same kind of relationship where, you know, he'll give me a heads up if there's something that we think might be a little contentious coming up so that we can prepare. And by the same token, if I'm getting a lot of citizen input on something after he's put a sign out or sent a notice out, I'll give him a heads up that I'm getting a lot of calls on this. So, you know, just so that we're not blindsided in a meeting, because that makes it all run a little more smoothly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a marvelous working relationship, and everybody on his staff, which is growing, and we're very grateful for that now, because it was pretty lean and mean for a while there.
Yeah, it was Tommy.
Yeah, it was. It was a one-man show for a while.
Oh no, we had Mary Ann.
We have Mary Ann, who, yes, who is the glue that was holding it together. But you know, they do a fabulous job on whatever we ask. If we say, well, can we look at this option, or what about this? They'll go back and do the research, and sometimes we send them back several times before we're comfortable taking it to the community.
And in an upcoming show, I want to get, we've got 2 new planners on staff, and I want to get those two very exciting young people that we want to get on the show one day. You guys are planners, so your job is to plan. And out there's a 10-year comprehensive land plan.
Right.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about that.
The land use plan.
Land use.
Well, actually, it's a pretty official document that has to be adopted by City Council. It's a state mandate for planning commissions to develop this every 10 years. And then we're supposed to do some interim, you know, updates, because obviously 10 years in today's lifetime, in today's world and business environment is a very, it's a lifetime. So anyway, this plan is not an ordinance, but what it does is it forms a strategic foundation for us to use as a reference point when we're making decisions about specific applications, because it's comprehensive, and it basically says, look, looking at this huge community land use, where do we want to have additional parks? Where do we want to have developments? What kind of corridors do we want to have for business? And it's a very global, non-specific. It doesn't say we want, 2 fast food places here. It isn't that, but it just says these are the kinds of directions that we want the city to grow in. It's tied a lot to the utilities, because that's obviously a big driving force. And then once that is formulated and approved, and we're just getting ready to begin that process now for this go around on it, then every time we look at an application, we reference it and we go, okay, is this aligned with the comprehensive plan? And if not, then we need to go back and really do some extra justification of why it's okay to make an exception. So it really forms a strategic foundation for us to use in decision making.
Okay.
And one of the things Liz indicated is you do revisions through that 10-year period. And one of the things that we noticed in this last 10-year period was we were getting a lot of utility requests out toward the interstate, and expecting some growth out toward the interstate. And so our comprehensive plan did not go out that far. So we did a north side plan so we could have a comprehensive plan for that particular area of our utility district.
And I think you guys also look at, I know in my former role with PRT, when we did a master plan several years ago, we brought that master plan to the Planning Commission to say, does this fit in with what you're doing? And I think others have done similar.
Absolutely. And that's a very appropriate thing to do, because then you've got this master plan that really means something and is being used.
Well, now, tell us why you serve on the Planning Commission. It's obviously not the pay.
No. Yeah, we get a free bottle of water every week.
There you go.
You know, I have, I've been in Aiken about 15 years, and I will tell you that it is now the place that will be my lifelong home. As with many people who come here, it's very easy to fall in love with this community. I fell in love with an Aikenite, and that got me here, but you know, I have since fallen in love with the community. It has been a wonderful community to me, a very embracing and welcoming community. And this is, for me, it's almost a labor of love to want to give back. And I do think, you know, my interests and perhaps some skills lend themselves to this. I am a strategist, I am a planner by nature, and so I think there's kind of a good fit. And I love doing this. I really have enjoyed this. Now, a lot of people may think, oh, it sounds dull, but it's really pretty exciting when you get to read all these things and you kind of figure out, gosh, maybe I am making a contribution. And so for me, that's the most important thing, to maintain the balance of what is the ambiance of Aiken that we all have come to love, and how do we keep that character and yet balance it with having enough economic growth that the community survives. You know, it's no secret that here in South Carolina, so many of our small towns are dwindling and dying. And so it takes effort to think about how you have a balance of keeping this character and yet keeping it alive.
Sure.
And that's a challenge, and for me, that's really the primary reason I love to do this.
And the City Council spoke a little bit Monday night about the new economic vitality person, I think is the title that they're going to have. That person in the Planning Commission, there's going to have to be a marriage there between those two.
I'm hoping we'll work very closely. In fact, I'm going to suggest that when this person is on board, that we make sure that they come to our meetings and that we have perhaps a little debriefing session and let them understand what we're doing. It's a great time because we're getting ready to launch this big 10-year comprehensive plan review, and that's going to be more than a year-long effort, and that's a huge commitment for us, both in terms of time and energy and resources. So this is a great time to involve someone new.
Good. I liked your statement about coming to Aiken and being here. You know, I came to Aiken on a 5-year plan. That was 31 years ago. So
wow. Well,
I think
you
I've overshot
understand
that a little bit. Yeah.
Well, no, you have adjusted appropriately. That's the way to look at it.
Okay. Change topic just a little bit. Recently we had Tom Rapp on the show, and Tom took us through everything he does on a day-to-day basis with him and his crews and his responsibilities. I believe the Planning Commission had a work session, if you will, or a meeting with Tom. Take us through that and what happened at that meeting and what you guys talked about.
Well, that was just last night, and that was, I think, a great example of how our work sessions operate. I think the request originally originated from our city manager suggesting that perhaps we need to look at the tree ordinance again and see if we need to make some adjustments. And so Tom was invited to come and give us his perception. Now, we all know that Tom's focus is to leave every tree as natural as possible and to leave every tree exactly where it is. And so I know that the idea of giving people permission to cut some of them down or to trim them excessively is not to his liking, but we wanted to hear his perspective. And so we spent the majority of our meeting going back and forth with what kinds of things could we do. And it came down to, I think, our understanding that we need to give business owners in particular, developers, some latitude to make sure that everything is as cohesive as originally planned. But by the same token, I tried to shift the focus to, well, how do we prevent this problem? Now, as it stands now, there is a list of, I think, basically seven trees that you can have, and it does list this is how high they'll grow, and this is their, leaf span or branch span, whatever the technical term is. And I thought, but that doesn't mean much to most people. It's just a dot on a plan. And so I suggested that perhaps we consider looking at some clarification of, if you're going to plant this tree, then make sure it's not in front of the door, or that it, because it will touch the building at some point. And then if it gets big enough, then it's protected. So I think, because honestly, in all fairness, I think when people get this list, they take that list to some place like Coal Creek or some other place, and they go, which is the cheapest one I can get?
Sure.
I really think that's what happens. And then they realize, oh my goodness, now this thing is blocking my sign or blocking my door because it has grown so much. So, I think that what we're going to do is we're going to come back. We gave Tommy some suggestions. They're going to rework the plan change, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to add to that when it comes before Tom for his review, or even initially when we hand out the list to developers and owners, that they look at, okay, this is more suited for this is going to, because people say, well, it's got a 40-foot span. What does that really mean to you? So I think that if we can clarify that a little bit, we'll prevent some problems. So we look at how can we solve this immediate issue, but then how can we prevent the problem in the future?
A great example, there's an upcoming meeting with the folks who are going to be doing the work in the alley.
Yes.
And the merchants.
Yes.
And I had a merchant just yesterday tell me, let's make sure on the trees that we consider, as this tree grows, the trucks have to get in to empty
That's
the
right.
garbage and those kind of things.
That's
And
right.
we need to think about all of that.
That's right. And if they're going to be shedding or, dropping anything. I mean, I know they talked about having crepe myrtles, and they're what we call dirty trees. So I do think that's appropriate.
Okay. As chairman, you get to somewhat help set the vision for the Planning Commission. Tell us what your vision is for the commission.
Well, I would say it's really twofold. I would say one is maintaining that balance I was speaking of between how we have economic vitality and how we still maintain the ambiance. But more importantly, or as importantly probably, is I would love to see more community engagement. I spoke at a city council meeting last month and said, we have all these people here that are speaking to an issue, and I wish half of them had been able to come and speak with us first. It may or may not have changed our vote on it, but we would have welcomed the opportunity. A lot of people in the community don't really realize that we're there, that we are perhaps their first line of opportunity to weigh in on an issue. So for me, the vision is to do more to have community engagement. And I think if we did that, then we'd certainly be in great shape to make the best possible recommendations to council.
Good. That's good. Have we missed anything? Anything we want to cover?
I don't think so. You've done a great job
Well,
facilitating this.
Thank you. I want to tell you what a pleasure it is to watch you run a meeting. That in and of itself takes talent.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's God-given or taught or what it is, but you do a very good job. You allow people to say their piece, and once that's done, that's done.
That's done.
And you move on and you make decisions, and that is an art in and of itself.
Well,
and
thank
you
you.
and the
Thank
commission
you.
do a very good job of that.
Thank you. We try hard.
You do. Well, thank y'all both.
Thank
Liz,
you.
Tommy, for being with us today. Let me just remind anyone, if you have a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, shoot me an email and send that to aikenthisweek@cityofaikenSC.gov. Have a great week.